Welcome back to the development of our employee management tool. This fourth video will teach you how to create a reporting tool that will sort your data by 3 criteria and create reports using this data and allow you to print the data as well. So let's VBA. For the employee reporting part, I went ahead and created this user form, and you can create your own just by going back to Insert User Form. I went ahead and named it Form Report, just so I would know which one I'm talking about. I added 3 combo boxes, one for job title, one for department, and then one for reports too, because that's how I want to be able to sort my employee data. Now remember, when you do the combo box, you need to add in the row source down here. And it's just like what we did on the form employee. So you do that for those 3 boxes and then make sure that you label these. So this is reg 1, reg 2, reg 3. I did a run report button, which is command report. I have a print results, which is a command print. And then of course our clear and our close. The list box that I have here is what is the data is going to return to. So you basically are going to be able to define what you want to see in this list box. And we're going to take a look at that. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start by clicking Run Report and click View Code because this is what is going to trigger all of this. So from the beginning, I wanted to keep this pretty simple. So I decided that we were only going to be able to search by one criteria, not multiple. It adds a lot to your code if you want to search by multiple criteria. So in order to make sure the user can't select more than one, I added in a little bit of code to each one of these. So I'm going to click this comma box and hit View Code. Now you'll see for reg 1, I did this for reg 2 and reg 3, but I dimmed a variable called hold, and I dimmed it as a string because I want it to hold on to whatever the initial entry is into that box. So when the user selects something from the drop down, which is in reg 1, it's going to put it in this hold variable. Then it's going to make sure reg 2 and reg 3 are blank because we only want the one search data. But then it's going to turn around and it's going to put whatever that hold string is back into reg 1. And I just repeated that for the rest of this. For reg 2, I made the hold and then I made 1 and 3 blank. And here I made reg 3 the hold and I made 1 and 2 blank. So that is to make sure that the user can't have more than one criteria selected. Now, once the criteria has been selected, of course, you're going to want to run the report. So let's right click on Run Report so we can see the code that is behind it. Now I've set up 2 variables. They should look familiar. I've already talked about them in previous videos, but it's just I set up a range find because we have to find the criteria that we're looking for, and a string first find so that we don't search forever, that it will actually end when we start repeating. Now, one thing you got to remember is we always want to put in a list box clear uh, statement here because if not, it will just keep adding to whatever is already in the list box. So we're going to do list report dot clear, so it clears that out first. Now, when we get down to the actual filling of the list box, we have an if statement that we're going to use because we have to decide which code we're going to run. Now, first thing this is going to ask, it's going to ask if reg 1 is blank. So this back to back greater than less than signs, though that means not equal. So it's saying if reg 1.value is not equal to blank, meaning it's got something in it, it's going to run this section of code. But if reg 1 is blank, it's going to come down here and say, well, else if reg 2.value is not blank, then it's going to run the code as reg 2 for our criteria. And then if reg 2 is blank, it's going to say, well, is reg 3 not blank? And if reg 3 is not blank, then it's going to run this code. Now, if you hit the run report button and no criteria has been selected, everything is blank, it's finally going to come down here and say, well, else, meaning in the end, There'll be a message box that pops up that says, please select the search criteria, and then it's just going to exit the sub. It'll be done at that point. So that's how it's going to work through which set of code to run. Now, when we start out with the first one, so we're looking at reg 1, we're going to set our range find equal to dot range column M, because we're looking for reg 1. Now remember, reg 1 is our job title. And when we go over here to our data, we see that our job title is in column M. So that's why we're referring to that. So go back to our code. Now, it's looking for reg 1 and it's looking for XL part. I had it look for just the part of whatever it is, but you could put whole in here. It doesn't really matter in this one because we have drop-down menus that are it's going to match it all as one. So it's going to look for it, and it's basically if not range find is nothing. So remember, that's if as long as range find has a value, then it's going to proceed through. It's going to set our string first find equal to that first one. And then we're going to do our do loop, our loop through. So we put our do, and we're going to say, okay, if range find.row is greater than 1, so meaning is it in row 2 or more, then we're going to run this code. And it's just kind of like what we did before, except this time we're going to say we want our list report column count to equal 8. That means I want 8 columns in my list box. And at this point, you can decide what you want to see. But I went ahead and decided, I wanted things like their first and last name, their employee number. I want to have their new hire date, that kind of information in here. So you decide what you want to see, and that's what you're going to put here. So we do list report dot add item, range find, and I put dot offset 0 -1 because when we come back here, remember, this is our range find here, but if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 back the other way, that's going to give me my first name, and that's the first thing I want in my list box. So that's why I put -1. Now, remember with our list box, they always start with 0, so that means our next columns are going to be 1. So column 2 is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you decide what you want to go in each column. So when I say -10, that's going to be the last name. When I say -9, that's going to be the employee number. So on and so forth until you get whatever you would like to have in that column. Now it's going to do that for the first range find. Then it's going to come down here and it's going to set the range find again to dot range in column M, find next range find. That's where it's going to go to the next one. And it's going to see, does anything else meet that criteria? And it's going to keep looping while it's still finding things and while it doesn't equal the first one that was found. So it's going to do this for each of these. Just be sure to be aware though, when you're searching for reg 2, that is in column N. So if you want to return the first name, you actually have to go back 12 columns instead of 11. And so your numbers will adjust depending on where your range find is. So you're going to do that for regs 1, 2, and 3, and then that will be able to return whatever it is based on the criteria that you've selected. So let's see this in action. When I go here, let's say I want to look up toy shipper. I can click Run Report, and there we have 2 toy shippers. You can see I have the first and last name. I have the employee number. I have their date of birth, what their job title is, department, who their supervisor is, and their start date. And it's as easy as that. Now, if I want to go here and I want to go swing sets, notice how this goes blank. I can run the report and you can see I have one person in swing sets. I added another feature to this that you don't have to do, but I know when you're doing reporting, sometimes you want to look a little more specifically into that employee because you saw in our list box, it's only returning 8 columns when we have 17 columns worth of information. So I did a little double click coding here. So I'm going to right click on the list box and hit view code. And I'm back into that double click code that we had talked about earlier. And it really is pretty much the same as what we did previously. So I set my variables just like I did before, and I have the selected one. And in this case, though, the employee ID number is in the third column, which in a list box is number 2. So you just have to know wherever that unique identifier is, that's the column you're going to be pointing it towards. So now I come down here and I find the employee. It's on sheet 2 in column D. Remember, that's where the employee number is. And I offset it by -2 so that it starts with the first name. And here's where I added my little trick. I am wanting for when you double click on this that it opens the form employee filled with this employee's information. And I did that by putting form employee dot controls reg and x dot value equals find value. So it's kind of like what we did before with the double clicking, and then we offset it every time it loops through. And what it's going to do is it's going to go to the form employee and it's going to populate reg 1, reg 2, all the way through 17 based on the values that it finds on sheet 2 for that particular employee number. And then same thing as I did before, I wanted it to format the dates. So all I had to do was put form employee dot and then whatever the variable is, I had to do it over here as well. And so at the very end, after you do all that, then you do this little bit of code. Call form employee dot show. The employee form will open up and it will be populated with that employee's information. So let me show you what that looks like. We come here, I'll go to my toy shipper, run report. I'm going to pick on Jack Frost, double click him. This now your manage employees form opens up and look, we've got all of his information in there. And you can make changes here and save the employee just like you would if you had just opened it directly. So it's a neat little trick to have. I highly recommend putting it in there. It just makes it more efficient when you're working with the employee data. The last thing I want us to look at when we're talking about employee reporting is the print results. Because you run a report, you get the results in your list box, but what if you need to send that report to someone? What if you need to, send it up to the supervisor so they can verify it? Well, we want to be able to print results. And basically, what this means is we're going to take all the information in this list box and we're just going to populate a new Excel document because then you can either save it and email it or you can print it and hand it to someone. Gives you a little more flexibility. So I'm going to right click on print results to view code. It's real short code that we need to do. So we're going to do with workbooks.add. What that is it's going to add a brand new workbook. And everything that we're doing here is going to apply to the new workbook. It's outside of this one. So with this one, we're going to say dot sheets one. And notice the naming conventions are a little different with this because we don't know the name of this workbook. We don't know the name of the sheets. We are assigning these. So that's why we put the one in here. Then it's dot range, cells 1 and 1. So basically on the new sheet in cell A1 is where we want this information to go. And it's going to go from there, and then it cells, and it's going to be what is in your list box. All the information, it goes from the list report.list count, so however many rows you have, and then list report.column counts, that's how many columns. So we had in the last example 2 rows and 8 columns, so this would be a 2 comma 8 basically is what it equates to. And yeah, so that's going to be the range that it's going to add to it. So now with this sheets 1 dot name, we're changing the name to, I just picked employee report. You could change it to whatever you want, but doing the dot name will change the sheet. And then now I can say with sheets employee report, the used range, that's what it has data in it. The entire column, I want it to auto fit. I want it to stretch those columns wider to fit the data to where you can see it easily. So it's going to take that sheet and only the columns that have information and the entire columns, it's going to auto fit it to what is in the column cells. And yeah, that's all you have to do to be able to do that. So let's look at it in action. We'll play. I'm going to keep picking on this toy shipper. I'm going to click print results. And when I do that, see, I have a brand new workbook, employee reports, and here, oops, hopped over on me. Here is all the information that was in our list box. So yeah, that's why knowing what you put in your list box is pretty important. Well, that's it for our 4th video in this series. I hope that being able to look at this employee reporting taught you a few new techniques that you may not have known existed. As usual, I'll put this file down below the video in the notes so that you can have it to download and play around with. And if you have any questions, just drop it down there in the comments and I will be happy to answer and help in any way I can.